I shouldn't have read it. That's the first thing I told myself the moment I closed his diary. My hands shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. I shouldn't have read it, but I did, and now I can't unsee the words. I can't unread the line that changed everything. She's a good woman, but I've never been in love with her. That sentence is burned into my memory. I see it every time I close my eyes. Every time I hear his voice. I was putting away laundry, like I always do, and the drawer wouldn't close all the way. Something had jammed in the back. It was wedged between two old t-shirts. Black cover, no title, just his handwriting. Small, tidy, so perfectly him. I almost didn't open it, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe something deeper, needed to. What I found wasn't a confession. It wasn't an affair or a secret child or a second phone. It was worse. It was honesty, raw, unfiltered honesty that he never gave me with his voice, but spilled onto paper in private. And now I'm sitting here, staring at the man I've shared my life with for 16 years, wondering if he's ever truly seen me, because I've seen him now, and I can't look away. Every time he kisses me on the forehead and asks if I remembered to buy more milk. He doesn't know I read it, at least not yet. He doesn't know I stood in our bedroom with a sock in one hand and his leather-bound journal in the other, frozen in time as I realized I was never really chosen. I was the default, the safe bet, the practical decision. I remember the exact moment I found it. I wasn't even snooping. I used to believe we were ordinary, not perfect, not the kind of couple that holds hands at every dinner or posts anniversary selfies with glittering captions, but solid, quiet, predictable. Mark was the kind of man who made coffee before I woke up, who mowed the lawn without being asked, who remembered to schedule oil changes and always paid bills on time. Reliable to a fault. We met in college. I was studying literature. He was engineering. I liked poetry. He liked solving things. Equations, problems. Me, sometimes. I wouldn't say it was love at first sight. It wasn't fireworks and aching desire. It was calm, comfortable, easy. He asked me to marry him with a nervous smile and a modest ring, in a parking lot after a movie. I said yes before he even finished the question, because it made sense, because we made sense. And for a long time, that was enough. We built a life, a mortgage, 2 kids, matching towels and school pickup schedules. We grew into the kind of couple people describe as stable, like that was the highest praise. But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking if I was happy, if he was happy, if either of us still looked at each other the way we did in that tiny college apartment with the broken heater and 1 spoon. He stopped kissing me in the morning. I stopped waiting up at night. The silences grew longer, more comfortable. We became fluent in routine, but strangers in emotion. And yet, I never doubted him. Never thought there were secrets. He was too steady for secrets, too predictable for deception. Until the day I found his diary and realized that silence can hide more than chaos ever could. Looking back, there were signs. They weren't loud or obvious. There were no lipstick stains or whispered phone calls in the hallway. Just changes. He started spending more time in the garage, said he needed space to think. I believed him. We all need space. But then I realized I hadn't actually sat beside him on the couch in weeks. He used to hum when he washed dishes. That stopped. He used to hold my hand under the table when we had dinner with the kids. That stopped, too. One night, I reached out for his hand during a movie, and he flinched, like I had surprised him, like he'd forgotten I was there. I laughed it off, because I had learned to excuse the little things, to explain away the distance. He's tired. He's stressed. This is just what marriage looks like after 15 years. But the truth is, I was lonely. Not the kind of lonely where you're alone, the kind where someone is sitting right next to you, breathing the same air, and you still feel like you're whispering through a glass wall. I told myself I was overreacting, that everyone goes through dry spells, that connection fades and flows like tides. Still, sometimes I'd lie awake at night, listening to him breathe, wondering if he was dreaming of someone else. Not someone specific, just not me. And I hated myself for thinking that, because what kind of wife doubts her husband just because he doesn't reach for her anymore? What kind of wife needs constant reassurance just to feel safe? I thought maybe it was me. Maybe I had changed, gained weight, lost that spark, gotten too caught up in carpools and grocery lists to be interesting anymore. So I tried. I planned date nights, bought a new dress, left him notes in his lunchbox like we were in college again. He smiled, said thanks, but something in his eyes stayed far away, and I stopped trying, because nothing is lonelier than giving all your warmth to someone who's already gone cold. And I think, deep down, I knew that long before I opened the drawer, long before I read the truth in his own words. It was a Thursday, late afternoon. I had just finished folding the last load of laundry when I went into our room to put things away. Mark's drawer wouldn't shut properly. Something was stuck. I didn't think much of it, bent down, gave it a tug, and that's when I saw it. A black leather notebook, no label, no lock, just simple, plain, and very him. I hesitated. There was something sacred about it, like opening it would be crossing a line I didn't even know existed. But curiosity is a strange thing, especially when you've spent years trying not to look too closely. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it slowly, half expecting to find to-do lists or grocery plans. Instead, I found pages filled with neat, intentional handwriting. Dates, paragraphs, observations, emotions. I started at the beginning, entries going back months, some short, some pages long. At first, they were benign. Notes about work stress, little frustrations with the kids, political commentary. Nothing shocking. But then I turned the page and read. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. She's kind, dependable, but I don't feel passion. I never really did. I felt my throat tighten. I flipped again. We talk, but never deeply. I miss being understood. I miss being wanted. Another. She still smiles when I walk in. I don't know how to return it without lying. And then the one that stayed with me. She's a good woman, but I've never been in love with her. I froze. I must have read it 5 times. My eyes tracing the same sentence again and again, like somehow the words might rearrange themselves if I stared long enough. They didn't. I set the notebook down on my lap and stared at the wall. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, my world split clean down the middle by a single sentence. And all I could think was, how long have I been living with a man who never really chose me? And how long have I been pretending not to notice? In that moment, everything looked the same. The comforter I had picked out, the framed wedding photo on the dresser, the dent in the pillow where he rested his head each night. But it all felt counterfeit, like I had wandered onto a set of my own life, and I didn't know what role I was playing anymore. I didn't read it all at once. The next day, I told myself I wouldn't touch it again, that I had already seen too much, that some truths didn't need repeating. But that night, when he fell asleep beside me, breathing evenly like nothing had changed, I reached for it again. I read by the hallway light, sitting cross-legged on the floor like a child reading a forbidden book, and page by page, the image of our marriage unraveled. She laughs, but I don't feel it anymore. It's like watching someone perform a version of joy. When she touches me, I stiffen. I hope she doesn't notice. Sometimes I imagine a life with someone else, not anyone in particular, just someone I could breathe with. I held my breath between sentences. I wanted to stop. I wanted to put it back, pretend I had never seen any of it. But a part of me needed to know how long this had been going on, how long he had been living in this parallel version of our life, one where I was a kind ghost he tolerated, not a partner he adored. He never said he hated me. He never wrote anything cruel. But somehow that made it worse. It was the quiet indifference, the resignation, the way he described me like a roommate who did her share, smiled politely, and folded his clothes just right. I wanted to scream. Not because he lied, but because I let the lie become our normal. And still, I didn't confront him. I made his coffee, kissed the kids, did the grocery run, but I watched him differently. I started noticing how his shoulders relaxed when he was on the phone, but not with me. How he smiled more when watching shows alone than during our dinners. How his voice lowered when he talked to certain people. Soft, intimate. A tone I hadn't heard directed at me in years. I began replaying our entire relationship like a film, frame by frame. Was the distance always there? Did he ever really lean in? Or was I just so eager to be loved that I filled in the silence with assumptions? One night, I caught myself whispering lines from the diary under my breath, trying to make them sound less painful, trying to imagine his voice saying them kindly, like a gentle truth instead of a rejection. But it didn't work, because no matter how softly it said, "I've never been in love with her," still shatters something. And once something's shattered, even silence sounds sharp. The days blurred. I moved through them like a ghost of myself, smiling when I needed to, nodding in all the right places, cooking dinner with the same seasoning, folding the same shirts. But I wasn't there. Not really. I had started to observe my life from the outside, like I was watching someone else play me. The wife, the mother, the dependable one. I stopped asking how his day was. I stopped waiting for him to notice when I wore something new or when I was quiet for too long. He didn't notice, of course. Or maybe he did, and pretended not to, the way I had pretended not to see our slow undoing for years. There was a comfort in the performance, a strange safety in the mask, because if I stayed inside the role, I didn't have to feel the full weight of what I knew. I didn't have to mourn the marriage out loud. But in private, I unraveled. I'd find myself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., repeating his words like a cruel mantra. She's a good woman, but I've never been in love with her. I tried to remember the last time he had looked at me, really looked, the way you look at someone you ache for. I couldn't find it. Not in the wedding photos. Not in the hospital room when I gave birth. Not even in the grainy vacation videos where we held hands for the camera. And still, I made his lunch every morning. Still, I reminded him about dentist appointments and restocked his shaving cream because it was easier to function than to fall apart. The kids didn't know. They laughed. They bickered. They left Legos in the hallway and asked what was for dinner. They loved him, and I didn't want to ruin that. So I smiled and answered questions and showed up to soccer games with orange slices like nothing inside me had changed. But I had. Something fundamental had shifted, cracked. And no matter how carefully I stitched myself up each morning, the seams were starting to show. In the way I paused before saying, "I love you." In the way I flinched when he touched my shoulder. In the way I started talking to myself in the laundry room, just to hear a voice that felt real. I was disappearing. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And the only thing anchoring me was the diary, the black book hidden beneath the laundry, whispering truths I couldn't unlearn. I didn't know what I wanted yet. I didn't know if I would leave, or stay, or burn it all down. But I knew this. I could never unread the words, and I could never go back to not knowing. One evening, I stood at the stove stirring a pot of pasta while he scrolled through his phone at the table. The kids were in their rooms. The kitchen was quiet, except for the bubbling water and the occasional ding from his notifications. And suddenly, I felt it. A wave of anger, not sharp or explosive, but slow and steady, like a rising tide. I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man so comfortable in his unspoken rejection, so secure in the routine I had built for both of us, that he didn't even notice the woman breaking next to him. I wanted to ask him. I wanted to slam the spoon down and say, "Do you still want me? Have you ever? Why didn't you tell me you never loved me?" But I didn't. I turned off the burner, set the table, served his plate, and as he ate, chewing, scrolling, nodding, I imagined what he would write about that moment later in his diary. Dinner was good. She's thoughtful, reliable, still here. That night, I stayed awake while he snored softly beside me. I held the journal in my hands, running my fingers over its spine like it was a living thing. And I thought, maybe I should write back, not to confront him, but to reclaim something, to leave my own mark in the quiet. So I opened to a blank page at the back and wrote, "You don't love me, I know that now." But I stayed. I stayed even when I didn't recognize myself. I stayed when your silence was louder than any fight we could have had. I stayed because I didn't know who I was without this version of us. But I'm starting to remember, and that should scare you. I closed the book, placed it gently back in the drawer, and went to sleep beside him for what might have been the last time in our old rhythm. I didn't make any decisions that night, but I knew one was coming, because you can only stay silent for so long before your soul starts screaming. And I was tired of whispering. I didn't plan to confront him. Not really. But truth has a way of bubbling up, even when you think you've buried it deep enough to forget. It happened one quiet Sunday morning. The house still smelled like coffee and pancakes. He was flipping through the newspaper, the actual print kind he insisted on, while I cleared the dishes. And then he said something that stopped me cold. He was reading aloud, half laughing at some story. Something mundane, silly. He looked up, smirking, and said, "You're lucky, you know. I'm the most boring man alive." It was a joke, but I didn't laugh, because something inside me cracked. Not from the joke itself, but from the fact that he could still smile, still tease, still pretend, after everything. I turned around, towel in hand, and said quietly, "I read it." He looked confused. "Read what?" "Your journal." His face changed, not dramatically, no wide-eyed panic or furious denial, just stillness, like a man who had been found out, but wasn't sure whether to run or surrender. He put the newspaper down. "You read it?" he asked, like he couldn't believe I'd broken that unspoken rule. I nodded. Silence stretched between us like thread about to snap. He didn't yell, didn't accuse me of violating his privacy. Instead, he whispered, "How much did you read?" "All of it." His eyes dropped to the table. I expected him to explain, to backpedal, to say it was just journaling, just processing, that he didn't mean it. But he didn't. He just sat there, and that silence said everything. I sank into the chair across from him. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. "You never loved me," I said. He didn't correct me, didn't rush to soften it, didn't grab my hand. And that, more than any word, was my answer. He let out a slow breath. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "I know." I thought I could grow into it, that it would be enough. I looked at him then, really looked, and realized something. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't cruel. He was just human, flawed, weak, afraid, like me. "I wrote something back," I told him. His eyebrows lifted. "In the journal?" I nodded. Another silence. Then, almost gently, he asked, "Do you want me to read it?" "I don't know." And that was the truth. Because I hadn't written it for him. I had written it for me, to remember what it felt like to choose myself, even in the smallest way. We sat there in the quiet kitchen, coffee cups still half full, the morning sun warming the floor beneath our feet. No shouting, no drama, just two people finally sitting in the wreckage of what they'd built, seeing it for what it really was. Not a tragedy, not a betrayal, just a slow fading. And maybe, in its own way, that hurt even more. We didn't talk much after that. Not about the journal, not about the things it said, not about the fact that our marriage had been running on autopilot for years. But something had shifted. The silence between us was no longer avoidance. It was acknowledgement, a quiet agreement that we had both played a part in this unraveling, even if one had written the words and the other had lived beneath them. A few nights later, I found him reading the journal in the den. He didn't know I saw him. He had the book open to the back, the page I had written. I watched from the hallway, half hidden in shadow, my heart thudding like I was 20 again, and caught somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. He read it slowly, his finger tracing the lines like he was memorizing my voice for the first time. And when he closed the journal, he just sat there, still, like he had finally seen me, really seen me, and wasn't sure what to do with the version of me who could finally speak. We didn't have a big conversation, no dramatic decisions or slammed doors, but little things began to change. He started asking how I slept. He looked up when I entered the room. He touched my back lightly when passing by, tentative, like testing the shape of something broken. I didn't take it as a fix. I didn't see it as hope. It was too late for that, but it was honest. And for the first time in years, I felt like we were occupying the same space, not pretending. I still don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll stay. Maybe we'll separate quietly, dividing furniture and explaining gently to the kids. But whatever comes next, I'll walk into it with open eyes. Because now, I know. And once you know, you can't go back. You can only go forward, even if your voice shakes, even if the path isn't lit, even if you have to rewrite yourself from scratch. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not broken. I'm awake. And that, I think, is the beginning of something honest. It's strange how life keeps going, even after you realize something foundational was never truly there. The trash still needs taking out. Deadlines still exist. Your son still asks for help with his science project. Nothing stops. And maybe that's the most jarring part. There's no dramatic pause, no soundtrack playing as you stare out a window thinking, how did I get here? You just keep going. But something inside me has changed. I move slower now, not out of sadness, but intention. I notice things I used to rush past. The warmth of my coffee mug, the hum of the dryer, the quiet way the house exhales once everyone leaves for the day. I don't fill every silence anymore. I let myself sit in it, breathe in it. Because silence, I've learned, doesn't always mean something's wrong. Sometimes it's where the truth finally has room to speak. I still sleep in the same bed. He still sleeps beside me. But the difference is, now I know who I am when I'm not performing. And that knowledge, that reclaiming, is everything. There's a calm in knowing I don't have to beg for love, that I don't have to contort myself into someone more lovable. I am already enough. I was always enough. He didn't see that. Maybe still doesn't. But I do. And that's the only vision that matters now. I don't know what will become. Maybe we'll rebuild. Maybe we'll let go gently. Maybe we'll remain in this in-between space a little longer. Two people who shared a life, who failed and tried and failed again, but who never stopped being human. I don't hate him. I don't even blame him. Because the truth is, I lied too. I lied every time I smiled through the ache. Every time I pretended his indifference didn't sting. Every time I told myself, this is just what marriage looks like. We both created this, and now I get to create something new. Maybe just for me. Maybe something small, like a morning walk alone or a journal of my own. But this time, I won't write in silence. I'll speak, even if only to myself, because I've earned that voice, and I plan to use it.